My name is Amber Smith. As you heard, I work in government and community affairs for SwiftMud, or the Southwest Florida Water Management District. Don't forget that W. It's an entirely different agency. We'll go over that in a second. If we are marking our age compared to hospitals, I was born when Brandon Hospital was brand new. So it's been a while. Brandon Mall didn't exist. It was a cow pasture. But happy to be here in front of you today and talking about a couple different issues. How we were formed, how we were born, came out of something that we actually experienced last year very similarly as the organization. And then we're going to mix with what Todd was talking about with water conservation as well. And so just moving forward, so Florida is very different than other states. Of course, we're a peninsula, but we do have 5 water management districts. Kind of looks gerrymandered. That's because it's based on hydrogeologic boundaries. So we are the Southwest Florida Water Management District. Probably the same people who named University of South Florida, because it really is more West Central Florida. But things are a little bit different in South Florida back then. You also have St. John's. They're very similar to us in a lot of ways. And you have Swanee in Northwest Florida. We are all funded very differently. We're not a state agency. We are on the State of Florida organizational chart, a dotted line to the state DEP. So certainly we do follow along with their guidance or any of their recommendations, but we're funded vast majority through ad valorem. So you all as taxpayers are paying these funds. South Florida receives a lot of state and federal funding, and then Swanee and Northwest receive a lot of state funding. But St. John's and SwiftMud, we are more similar in that we receive a majority through ad valorem. So we do cover all or part of 16 counties. I cover the Tampa Bay area. So I cover 33 cities and 3 counties, and then the community affairs as well. But as you can see, we do cover all the way up to Levy, almost to Dixie County, and all the way down to Charlotte. As far as where we started to what we do now, this is what we do now. So water supply, water quality, natural systems, and then flood protection as it relates to large structures that we'll talk about in a second. A majority of your flood protection does belong to local government, so cities or counties, but we do have those large structures or things that we have permits over. So going back to September 10th, 1960, this is Hurricane Donna. And this is really one of the impetus for what we, where we came from. But where 1960 was similar to 2024, you had a very rainy season leading up to the beginning of hurricane season. You had a tropical storm, and then you had Hurricane Donna. So you had a lot of water flowing through the area, not just in one single confined storm. And then you had Hurricane Donna. So Hurricane Donna caused devastating flooding across the state and then all the way up the east coast of the United States. But memorably, in our Tampa Bay area, it caused really catastrophic flooding. This is Plant City. I got this from the photo archives. So, the east side of our region flooded tremendously. This is Tampa. And so you had a lot of areas that were pretty dramatically impacted for a long time. And that's a part of where we were formed. And the Army Corps came in, they did some studies, and then we'll have more information about the basins that were formed. But you saw what most of you know us from, which is the bypass canal that you go over, 301 and 75. And so an entire system was created. We'll hear more about that in a little bit. About moving the water away from Temple Terrace in Tampa. And that's what was built. There were other projects left off that we'll get to in the end. So the 2 main areas we will be focusing on today is the emergency response that we assist cities, counties, state with, as well as the water supply portion, dealing with regional water supply planning, alternative water supplies or AWS, and then conservation. The Watershed Management Program. So this is something that, again, local governments are really in charge of planning, action, implementation for, but we do assist as needed. The flood planning evaluation has significantly improved with technology over the years. So previously, when they were planning for floodplains, they were using very similar technology that they used to map out west. Great for mountains, not great in Florida where inches matter. And so now with the new technology that we have, the topographic data is a lot more accurate, and we found it to be extremely accurate for the last hurricane season. All of this information that we have is available to the public. If you just Google SwiftMud floodplain, it'll come up with this floodplain map viewer. And there has to be like a little disclaimer on there, like used for entertainment purposes or something. But you just click on that tool, and then it'll send you to here. And so this is an example of the blue areas are FEMA floodplains, and the yellow areas are the floodplains as mapped within the last floodplains that the local governments conducted. Sometimes that information is sent up to FEMA to better inform the floodplains. Sometimes it's not. But as you can see, this is the East Hillsborough area. You can see in the Lake the Notisassa area. And this is based on a 100-year storm event, which in many areas, including parts of Zephyr Hills, they experienced beyond a 100-year storm event when we got the 3 hurricanes in 3 months. But you can see, a lot of folks, again, in some of these areas, especially along the Withlacoochee, they hadn't seen this kind of flooding in over 100 years, according to our records. And so it's certainly beyond most of our lifetimes. And maybe perhaps your grandmother learned about it, but for people, I've heard many times people say, well, I've never seen this in my lifetime, and you haven't. Unless you're living in a certain area that was affected by Hurricane Donna. So we talked about the watersheds. This is an example, starting along those watersheds. So where the water moves. So again, inches matter in Florida. Everywhere that water is flowing, it's moving in that watershed. And so this is divided. So for example, here, of course, you've got Green Swamp, East Pasco, Cypress Creek, New River, Upper Hillsborough River. All of these things are informing things like where water's flowing, floodplains, water supply. This is an example along Island in the area around Silverado. And this is looking out. And so when you're on this and you check floodplain on the left side, as you zoom in, you can see more details. So you can see the homes along here that, within the Silverado area that in the floodplain show that they would be underwater. This is during a 100-year storm event again. And so if you experience beyond that, that line would move beyond that. I'm going to take you back, though, to what we also do on a monthly basis and where we came from and where we're going. And so starting with rainfall data and our water supply, how we plan, how we work with communities. So once a month, we receive rainfall data. We're looking at things as a 1-month basis as far as rainfall, as well as a cumulative. So do we enact watering restrictions when you have 1, 2, 3, 4 months of dry weather? Probably not. If you have a year or 9 months, perhaps. And so this is an example of our rainfall distribution graph, with yellow being average rainfall, orange being below average, red being extremely below average. This is the 1-year cumulative. So this is going to the time frame that we are entering the drought right before the hurricane. So February, March, you can see as an example, extremely dry. However, as a whole, when you're looking at this slide, very dry, versus this slide, which is normal, we were still holding over. We had plenty of water supply because of the hurricane we had received in 2022. So that's just giving you some background to show where we're going. So going into 2024, we were extremely dry. We were coming out of a drought time period, and we had enacted phase 1 water shortage restrictions. And so that's for Hillsborough, Pinellas, Pasco, saying you could only do 1 day a week watering. And Commissioner Oakley, sitting on Tampa Bay Water and having sat on our board, mentions this sometimes as well. Just reducing that watering by 1 day a week in those 3 counties, we were able to save 33 million gallons a day. So again, at that time in that dry season, it really helped us stretch our water. In the Lake Keystone area, I was in a community meeting right before Hurricane Donna hit. Sorry, not Hurricane Donna, Debbie. And I showed this graph. You can see the 3-year cumulative drop to where we were for the rainfall. So we were very dry for several years. The lakes were very low. And as such, Tampa Bay Water also reduced their pumping as well during that well field. So with the average being 7 or 8 per year, they were at 2.74. The Bill Young Reservoir at the time was low. The departure was very dry. And then we entered the hurricane season. So it is a kind of a normal part of our hydrologic cycle to have some kind of tropical weather come through. Usually we like for a little bit of a wave or a tropical depression with some rain, not, 3 hurricanes. But you can see this is the rainfall distribution from June through September of last year. And so it was way, very high, way above average. And then this is where we were in December of last year for that 1 month. So again, very dry. But as a whole, when you're looking at it cumulatively, like why we are not in water restrictions right now, we were still doing okay with the amount of water we had. So even several months later, you had the area being extremely wet still. And that gets into the hurricane recovery as well. So this is an example. We don't do river flood forecasting. That belongs to the National Weather Service, the River Forecast Center. I do implore you all to take advantage of connecting with them, get on their social media. River flooding is something that's delayed from storm surge or from flooding directly from a hurricane. And so you can even see this on the graph. And this is the Hillsborough River at Morse Bridge. So we have our Flatwoods area. Has anybody ever been there? A lot of our land we don't use for recreation. We're not in the recreation business. We do partner with local governments to help with that. But ours is generally for, again, our mission that we stick pretty strictly to. So in this case, in Flatwoods, we actually use to flood as a flood detention area. So as the Hillsborough River rises and we're activating that bypass canal and other areas, we're holding that water back. But as far as you can see, as far as the amount of water that was coming through, the record for the Hillsborough River at Morse Bridge was 34.7 feet, and we reached 38.16 feet. So just incredible record-breaking amounts of rainfall coming through the east side of our area. I show this because it's a good illustration of where we were. This is the Hillsborough River at Temple Terrace. And so you can see it dip where we were in the drought. We started getting a little bit of rain, and then we got Hurricane Debbie, Helene. We had a monsoon in the middle there, and then Milton. And so all of that water really makes a difference. And then you can see where we are now comparatively. As a note, when you are looking at this data and you're looking at that 1 year, I received a lot of emails with people saying, oh, look, the Hillsborough River is the lowest it's ever been. But they were looking at that 1 year cumulative. Again, they were comparing where we are now compared to the hurricane. So just a note for you when you're reading data to make sure that you're looking at the timeline there. So this is just for 1 day in Hurricane Milton. So this is October 9th to 10th, and you're talking about an area near our Medard Reservoir along the Alafai, 16.7 inches. And all of that flows to the east side of Pasco. And when you get in the green swamp area, it's flowing downwards. But of course, that area affected Zephyr Hills as well. Now, the Withlacoochee does flow north, so a lot of that area around Dade City and the Green Swamp was receiving both rainfall from one side and the Withlacoochee water from the other, along in Dade City and Zephyr Hills. So again, that added to the amount of water that came into the area. You can see the Tampa Bay Lakes, where we were nearing the top of above normal. The Alafai really at the top. Hillsborough River, Zephyr Hills topping out at that 100% mark. This is the 17-day time period of October 1st through the 17th of last year. So again, it's not just our area. You know, when you're receiving a hurricane and you're receiving a bad hurricane, or even a hurricane that's dropping a lot of rain, you know, again, it wasn't just our area, it was the entire region. So when you're looking at the watersheds, where water is flowing, you know, where it's flowing south, where it's flowing north, it was our entire area. And as such, the downside to that as well is the aquifer. And so you had the aquifer on October 23rd. We measure this once a week. It was at 93% full. So not only are you receiving rain, but it can't soak into the ground. And in fact, in some areas, you had the aquifer actually coming up. And so, you know, at that point, especially when you have water that's going into a bowl area that water normally doesn't flow into, at that point, it would either have to be pumped out or it would have to seep into the ground, but it can't seep into the ground because the whole area is saturated and the aquifer is very full. So you have to wait for that to go down. Even in February this year, it was still at 60%, which is above average. Now, where we are currently, September 30th, we're at 31. So because we didn't receive that tropical rain, we received the lack of rain. The good news is people have been able to recover. All those people who finally had, you know, all of that water that hadn't been able to seep into the ground, it's finally able to be gone. However, we are now going into our dry season below average. As you can see, so this is the rainfall data. So normal for September, we have 6.92 inches. We're at 2.78. Historically, we're in the central aquifer area. So the historic average for rainfall for this time period, January through September, 45.17 inches. We're at 37.07. So we're just kind of taking into account, again, as you can see, this is the graphic colored illustration of what you saw. We are dry to very dry. Now, going through, you know, again, the whole region having experienced what Zephyr Hills experienced as well. You know, again, I cover 3 counties. So, you know, unfortunately, the residents in Bel Air who are on a bluff 60 feet above level, you know, they were flooded. The residents in East Hillsborough County, in Alafai, Lithia, Seffner, they also flooded. Areas in West Pasco, Pinellas, they also flooded. Our whole region was really suffering. But moving forward, you know, there are some things we can additionally do and prepare for. One of the things that Hillsborough County did was they sent out a pamphlet to those people who didn't realize they were within that 100-year floodplain. And they mentioned some numbers and some illustrations to get them to understand, okay, you may not have been in that FEMA graph, but you were in that 100-year floodplain. So that's something that can better inform them in the future. Now, going into that dry time period and trying to moderate these extremes that we have in Florida, Todd talked about the city of Zephyr Hills adopting Florida Water Star. And so this is an ordinance program we have. St. John's is also participating in this. It's been extremely successful in Polk County. So this is water conservation, but on the building side. So as you're building, if you put in this water saving technology, it can save a tremendous amount of water and again, stretch that water budget that we have for that region so that when we have those dry time periods, you know, the city can still continue to grow, you know, as they need, as the residents see fit. So we've had 13 ordinances passed. This is saving 1.3 billion gallons annually. What are we trying to avoid? So we used to have water use caution areas in this area. It was called the Northern Waka. And so does anybody remember the water wars? And so this is really part of why Tampa Bay Water was formed. Zephyr Hills is not a part of it currently, but acting as that cooperative for the whole region, they were able to kind of pool those resources instead of fighting against each other, for the well fields, and they were able to build alternative water supplies to help alleviate those extremes. We were able to declare this recovered recently, but again, really looking forward to finding efficiencies to where we can use technology not to completely alter our life or what we want to see in our landscaping, but using it to be more efficient with the water. And so the before and after the recovery, as long as we aren't over pumping our aquifer, this is what we're trying to avoid. So you can see the before and the after for the Crossbar Ranch area. Cypress Creek, Mud Lake. And so this is the graphic illustration. The orange line is our population. And actually, you can see in the early 2000s area where we started that recovery process with declaring that Northern Waka, and where we were pumping with the aquifer before. So even in droughts where you see that little bump time frame, we can still continue to remain efficient even with population growth if we enhance the technologies that we have available. So there were permittings, there was that recovery plan, the alternative water supply projects, and then we established the minimum flows so Cypress Creek, the other ones, could continue to flow. So you had the surface water treatment plant established. So that's treating that river water, and the district contributed to Tampa Bay Water about $95 million toward that. You had the Bill Young Reservoir. This is really key right now. You saw the aquifer at 31% full. I'll show you the Bill Young Reservoir and we allowed them to take additional water from the Alphi. It's almost completely full right now. And then of course you had the desal plant, which has come back online, and it's new with a lot of new equipment, and it's able to treat a tremendous amount of water every day. And we are committing $473 million toward Tampa Bay Water, for these uses. We do still have the Southern Waka in effect. So everything that we've done with you all in the Northern Waka, we're still working through the Southern area. But as far as planning, and this is when you're talking about comprehensive plans, water use permits, this is some of the population graph that we're looking. You can see the Tampa Bay area, the Southern, the Heartland area. So we definitely need to enhance some of the technologies within the Tampa Bay area to ensure that as our population increases, as you can see, this is the UF data from what they call BEBR. It's the Bureau of Economic and Business Research. And this is the city of Zephyr Hills specifically. This was before Florida Water Star was enacted. And this is actually during one of the planning meetings. And you can see Tammy up there, who's one of the consultants there. And so at the time, when we issue a water use permit, it's supposed to last about 20 years. So we had issued a update, and that was supposed to last the city for a few decades. However, in 2020, they came in to us and they said, hey, you can see that graphic there. We're going to be hitting that pretty soon in the next few years. Let's figure out a way to work together to cover that graph so that you can last till 2040. And we were able to do that through Florida Water Star. This is some of the hotspot areas that are considered to be overwatering. The city of Zephyr Hills, they started doing spot checks for people as far as if they were watering on the right day, if there were some areas that needed to be fixed as far as irrigation. And as a part of that, and this is something open for you all, for businesses, you can participate in our WISE program. And so this is helping multifamily housing or businesses large commercial industrial buildings save a lot of water. So we did a study in the city of Tampa where they switched out in apartment buildings the toilets, faucets, and shower heads. And you can see the before and the after of the water savings. So the gray being before, green being after. So this apartment complex was able to save 577,000 gallons a month. This one was able to save 780,000 gallons a month. So you really need both of these programs working together, right? The retrofits make a huge difference. I completely underestimated before I started. And then you also need at the building stage, with the Florida Water Star. But we need all your help to help retrofit and reduce the water. So here's another example, 692,000 gallons a month saved. We received one email. This is a very typical email with business owners or property owners very excited that their water bill went down. So this one went down, again, with retrofits, it's an instant savings. So August 7th, their bill was $59,000. On September 4th, it went down to $28,000. And this is the illustration of that as far as the gallons that they were able to save per month and the amount of water. So if you are a property management firm, hey, it could look great on your evaluation too if you start to save a lot of money. And this is some of the examples more specifically with toilets. So there was one example where they replaced 286 toilets. We gave them $75. And they were able to reduce their monthly water bill by $7,760. Another example, 120 toilets, shower heads, aerators, reduced water bill by $6,000. Before and after, this is actually a pretty new building that they retrofitted. So you can save money on that end, and then going back to Florida Water Star and what the city is experiencing. Again, that's the building stage, saving it with irrigation, indoor, and landscaping. And the key with that is irrigation. So this is what we're trying to even out. This is my own yard. And so a lot of times too, working with Pasco County or IFAS throughout the areas, you can have a free irrigation evaluation done. Pasco County has been sending this out to folks to participate in. With our own yard, we do have grass, we live in an HOA, but we were able to find lots of areas with broken nozzles, spray heads that could be capped. You had one pointing at the neighbor's yard under a shrub, when it was originally built. We were able to get those things fixed, and we saved 60% on our water bill. So I encourage you all, even at the residential level, to take advantage of what's available to you. And then I'm going to turn it over here.